My 6-year-old granddaughter clung to my arm and shouted, "Grandma, don't go!" I laughed at first, then smelled gasoline. One heartbeat later, the car burst into flames. I hit the ground, ears ringing, smoke everywhere. If Emma hadn't screamed, I'd have died right there, seatbelt on, smiling at a lie. If you're watching this video, please like and subscribe to the channel and tell me in the comments where you're listening to my story of survival from. I want to know how far it has reached. I used to think peace meant quiet. Morning coffee on the porch, the sound of cows in the pasture, the smell of dew on the grass. Out here in Kentucky, life doesn't rush, it hums. My son Daniel lives just a few miles down the road, close enough that I can see his truck lights on the hill when he drives home late. He remarried last year after 2 hard years of grief, and I tried my best to welcome Sarah, his new wife. She looked like she belonged in a magazine, long hair, polished nails, a voice sweet enough to make you lower yours without realizing it. She always called me Mom, in that bright tone that makes people melt. I wanted to believe her kindness was real. My granddaughter Emma is 6, freckles, tangled hair, and questions that never stop. She's the kind of child who talks to butterflies and tells them her secrets. I can't explain it, but sometimes she seems to feel things before they happen. One time she told me not to bake the apple pie because the oven feels mad. I laughed. Until the power went out halfway through, she just smiled and said, "Told you." When Sarah married Daniel, she took charge fast. She changed the furniture, the curtains, even the way dinner was served. Daniel said she was just being helpful, but sometimes helpful feels like control with lipstick on it. She started handling all the bills, the insurance, the car payments. I told myself it was fine. Young people like to do things their way. Still, there were moments that made me pause. The way she kept her purse close, even in her own kitchen, the way she'd go quiet whenever I walked into a room. But Emma loved her daddy's smile, and as long as he was happy, I stayed quiet. I'd learned long ago that sometimes silence keeps the peace. On Sunday mornings, Sarah would dress Emma in matching dresses and ribbons, posting pictures with captions like "Blessed beyond words." She looked like a dream daughter-in-law. The church ladies adored her. And maybe that's what scared me most, because I'd seen smiles like that before, the kind that only stay up when people are watching. One evening after supper, Emma crawled into my lap and whispered, "Mommy doesn't like when I talk to you." I asked why, and she just shrugged, eyes wide, as if she wasn't sure she was allowed to answer. I told her, "That's okay, baby. We'll just talk quietly." From then on, our little conversations felt like secrets wrapped in Sunday dresses. Then came that Saturday. Sarah showed up early, bright and hurried, saying she wanted to take me shopping for garden supplies. "You'll love the new store by the highway," she said. Daniel kissed her cheek, said he'd meet us later. It all seemed normal. I packed my purse, grabbed my cardigan, and followed her to the driveway. Emma stood by the porch steps, still in her pajamas, holding her stuffed rabbit. "Go put on shoes, sweetheart," Sarah said. Emma didn't move, her little shoulders tensed. "Emma," I said gently, "we'll be back soon." That's when she grabbed my hand and screamed, "Grandma, don't go!" Everything after that feels like flashes. The smell of gas, the heat, the sound of Daniel shouting my name. The world went white, then black, then orange. I remember the taste of smoke and Emma crying somewhere far away, even though she was right beside me. When the noise stopped, I was lying in the grass staring at the sky, my ears buzzing like a swarm of bees. Sarah was on the driveway, crying, screaming about how she didn't know what happened. But I saw the look in her eyes, sharp, calculating, alive. Not shocked, not terrified, just aware that her plan had failed. At that moment, I didn't understand why. I just knew the child's voice that saved me wasn't panic, it was warning. They said the explosion was an accident, a leak, maybe a spark, bad luck. That's what the fire chief told Daniel while I sat on the back of the ambulance with a blanket over my shoulders. My hands wouldn't stop shaking. I wasn't hurt, not really, just burned around the edges, skin, clothes, nerves. But something deeper felt scorched. I watched Sarah pace the driveway, mascara running, her voice breaking between sobs. "I don't understand, I just filled the tank yesterday," she said over and over like a line she'd practiced. The paramedic asked if I wanted to go to the hospital. I said no, I just wanted to hold Emma. She was sitting with one of the neighbours, wrapped in a towel, her tiny face smudged with ash. When she saw me, she ran so fast she nearly fell. "You're okay," she said against my chest, crying into my shirt. "I told you, Grandma, the car was bad." I kissed her head and whispered, "You did, sweetheart. You did." Daniel looked like he'd aged 10 years in one morning. He kept glancing between the car and Sarah, his mouth opening, closing, no sound coming out. The car was just metal and smoke now, black pieces scattered across the gravel. I could still smell the gasoline, thick, bitter, too much for a simple leak. But when I tried to speak, my throat closed. Every time I looked at Sarah, I saw her eyes in that moment before the fire, calm, almost cold. That night, Daniel insisted we stay with them. "It's safer," he said, though I wasn't sure for who. Sarah nodded quickly, too quickly. She made tea, fussed over my arm, told me she couldn't sleep thinking what could have happened. Her voice trembled just enough to sound sincere. I sat there, watching her pour sugar into my cup like we were in some polite nightmare. Later, when I tucked Emma into bed, she whispered, "Mommy said you shouldn't tell Daddy." I froze. "Tell him what, baby?" Her little fingers twisted the blanket. "She said Grandma makes people worry for no reason." My stomach dropped. I smiled so she wouldn't see the fear. "You get some sleep, okay? Grandma's not going anywhere." I sat by her bed until she drifted off. Then I went downstairs, stood by the window, and watched Sarah through the reflection on the glass. She was in the kitchen wiping down the counter that was already clean, movements too careful. When she turned off the light, her face passed through the reflection like a ghost. For a second, our eyes met. She smiled, small, polite, empty. I didn't sleep that night. Every sound made me flinch, the hum of the refrigerator, the wind against the gutter. I kept replaying the explosion, the smell, the way Sarah's hands never shook. And somewhere between those flashes, I wondered if grief had finally broken me. Maybe I was seeing things that weren't there. The next morning, the police came back to take statements. Daniel stood beside Sarah while she cried into his shoulder, telling them how she'd checked the car herself, how she loved me like her own mother. She sounded so convincing that even I started to doubt myself. The officer wrote something down, thanked us, and left a card in case we remembered anything unusual. When they drove away, Sarah turned to me, her eyes soft. "You scared me half to death yesterday," she said. "Promise me you'll rest." I nodded, because that's what people expect from grandmothers. They nod, they forgive, they disappear quietly into the background. But inside, something shifted, a crack in the calm. That evening, I took Emma for a walk down the gravel road. The air smelled like rain, clean and new. She held my hand tight. "Mommy was mad," she said suddenly. "Mad at what, baby?" "At you," she said. "She said you ruin everything." I stopped walking. "When did she say that?" "Yesterday," Emma whispered, "before the fire." I knelt down so we were eye level. "Listen to me, sweetheart. If anything ever feels wrong, you tell me, okay? Always." She nodded, serious, then looked up at the sky. "Grandma," she said, "why do bad people pretend to be nice?" I didn't know what to say. I just squeezed her hand. That night, I couldn't shake the question, why did bad people pretend to be nice? Maybe because it works. Because people like me want peace more than truth. Because it's easier to believe in the smile than the warning. By the end of the week, Daniel was back at work, trying to move on. The insurance adjuster came by, called it a freak accident. Sarah brought him lemonade. I watched from the porch, feeling like a ghost in my own story. The world around me was moving forward, but my mind stayed in that moment. The scream, the heat, the look on her face. Sometimes when you survive something you shouldn't have, the hardest part isn't what happened. It's what everyone refuses to believe afterward. For a few days, everyone acted like it was over, like the fire had burned away the truth with it. Sarah was quieter than usual, softer even, calling me Mom in that sweet voice she used when people were watching. She brought soup, folded laundry that wasn't hers, even offered to drive Emma to school. To anyone else, she looked like an angel trying to make up for bad luck. But every time she called me Mom, I heard the echo of that explosion in her tone. It wasn't affection, it was warning. I kept telling myself I needed proof before I accused her of anything. I've seen what words can destroy. But that's the thing about fear. It doesn't wait for proof. It just sits there, whispering all the things you don't want to believe. 3 nights after the fire, Daniel asked me to talk. He looked exhausted, guilt pulling at the corners of his mouth. Mom, he said, I know you're shaken up, but Sarah's really been trying. She feels terrible. I wanted to believe him. He was my boy, the same boy who used to hide behind my apron when thunderstorms scared him, but now he was a man, and love had made him blind. I'm fine, I told him. I just can't stop thinking about what could have happened. He nodded. We all can't, but it was an accident, okay? The police said so. Accident. That word sat between us like a stone I couldn't move. When I went upstairs that night, I saw light under Emma's door. She was sitting up in bed, drawing. I sat beside her. What are you making, sweetheart? She showed me a picture of a car with fire all around it. Inside, a stick figure with long hair. Is that me? I asked gently. She shook her head. That's Mommy, I froze. Why is she in the fire? She wanted to make it, Grandma. She told me it had to be perfect. My heart thudded so hard I could hear it. When did she say that? Before the boom, she whispered. I didn't ask more. Kids remember things their own way, I told myself. Still, that night I hid the picture in my drawer. I couldn't look at it without shaking. The next morning, Sarah acted like everything was fine. She wore yellow, bright and cheerful, humming while she made pancakes. You're up early, she said when I walked in. Couldn't sleep, I replied. She smiled, flipped a pancake, then looked at me. You know, I keep thinking how blessed we are. God must have been watching over you. I watched the batter bubble on the pan. Maybe he was, I said. Or maybe he sent a little girl to do the watching for him. Her hand froze mid-flip. Then she laughed lightly. Emma does have good instincts. I smiled, just enough to match her tone. She gets that from her mother. For a moment, our eyes met. No more words, just a long, thin silence stretching across the kitchen like a tight wire. She looked away first. After breakfast, she offered to drive me to the pharmacy to pick up something for the burns. I said no, I'd walk. Her smile tightened, just a hint. That afternoon, I went to the backyard to water the flowers. When I came back in, my phone was on the counter, screen up, unlocked. I never leave it that way. A new text flashed from Daniel. Heading home soon. Love you, Mum. I looked up and saw Sarah by the window, folding towels that didn't need folding. She smiled again, that same thin line. You left your phone unlocked, she said softly. Careful with that. The world's full of snoops these days. That night I wrote everything down. The smell, the fire, Emma's drawing, Sarah's words. I didn't know what to do with it, but it felt like armor. Sometimes writing the truth down is the only way to stop it from vanishing. Before bed, I checked on Emma. She was asleep, one hand on her stuffed rabbit, the other clutching a folded piece of paper. I slipped it out gently. It was another drawing. This one showed 3 stick figures, me, Emma, and Daniel, standing together, while a 4th figure stood far away, half-coloured in red. I stood there for a long time, listening to her steady breathing. Somewhere in that small child's world, Emma already understood what none of us wanted to admit. Peace wasn't coming back, not while Sarah was still smiling in this house. The next few days felt like walking on eggshells that could scream. Sarah moved through the house like music you couldn't turn off, soft, constant, impossible to ignore. She kept leaving little gifts on my nightstand: lavender soap, a scented candle, a note that said, "Rest, Mum." Each one felt like a peace offering carved out of guilt. But guilt never smells that sweet. Guilt stinks of fear, and fear was starting to show around the edges of her smile. On Wednesday, I decided to test her. Daniel was at work, Emma at school. I baked an apple pie the way my husband used to love it and waited until the smell filled the house. Then I called out, "Sarah, could you grab the cinnamon from the pantry?" She walked in, smiling. "Smells heavenly." I watched her open the cabinet. The shelf where I'd left the matches 2 days ago was empty. "Looking for something?" I asked. "Just checking for cinnamon," she said, her voice steady. But her eyes flicked to the countertop, then to me. I smiled. "Oh, I thought maybe you moved the matches again." She paused, then laughed lightly. "You're funny, Mum." She took the cinnamon and turned away too fast. I knew she'd moved them. I just didn't know why. That night, Daniel brought home takeout. We sat around the table, pretending nothing had changed. Emma talked about her class project. Sarah kept refilling everyone's glasses like a perfect hostess. At one point, she touched Daniel's arm and said, "You know, we should finally install that gas heater in the garage before winter." My fork froze halfway to my mouth. Daniel nodded absent-mindedly. I looked at Emma. She was staring at her stepmother, eyes narrow, mouth tight. Kids notice more than we think. After dinner, when Daniel went to put Emma to bed, I stayed in the kitchen with Sarah. The hum of the refrigerator filled the silence. I turned to her. "You've been through a lot lately," I said softly. "It must be hard, pretending everything's normal." She looked up sharply. "Pretending?" "I mean, after the accident, people handle trauma differently." Her face softened again. "You think I'm not handling it well?" "I think you're trying too hard." For a moment, her mask slipped. A flash of annoyance, then gone. "I just want this family to feel safe again." "So do I," I said. We stood there, the smell of leftovers hanging in the air. Then she leaned closer, smiling that practiced smile. "Then stop digging, Mum. Sometimes peace only comes when you stop asking questions." Her tone was sugar, but the message was knife. I smiled back. "You're right, dear. Peace matters." When she left the room, I exhaled for the first time in minutes. My hands were trembling. That was the first time she'd warned me outright. The next morning, I started keeping a notebook in my apron pocket. Every word she said, every glance, every strange smell, I wrote it down. I even noted the time she left the house and when she came back. I didn't know what I was building, but it felt like a lifeline. Friday afternoon, I went to pick Emma up from school. She climbed into the truck, quiet, holding something behind her back. "What's that?" I asked. She showed me a small bottle of cleaning fluid with a warning label, flammable. "Mommy had it in her purse," she said softly. "It spilled on the seat, so she gave it to me to throw away." I nearly stopped the car. "When was that?" "Yesterday. She said not to tell Daddy because it would make him mad." I took the bottle, wrapped it in an old towel, and tossed it into the trash at the next gas station. My hands wouldn't stop shaking. That evening, Sarah came home late, smiling, her hair perfect as ever. "Traffic," she said, setting her purse on the counter. "Long day." I nodded, pretending to believe her. Later, when everyone was asleep, I crept downstairs and looked inside her purse. Inside was another identical bottle, half empty. Next to it, a lighter. The kind with a long neck, the kind used for grills or fireplaces. We don't own either. I stood there in the dark kitchen, heart pounding. I didn't take anything. I just memorized the image. The next morning, she'd know someone had looked. I wanted her to. At breakfast, she mentioned it casually. "You were up late, weren't you, Mum? Couldn't sleep?" "Too much on my mind," I said. "You?" She smiled without looking up from her coffee. "Same." Emma glanced between us, sensing something she couldn't name. She reached for my hand under the table. I squeezed hers once, steady, like a promise. I realized then this wasn't fear anymore. It was a game, and Sarah thought she was winning. But I'd lived long enough to know People who hide behind sweetness always forget that silence can be louder than shouting. By Sunday, the air in that house felt heavy, like everyone was breathing someone else's secrets. Daniel was fixing the porch light, humming off key, oblivious. Sarah was in the kitchen, slicing fruit with that perfect rhythm of someone who never hurries, never worries. I watched her through the reflection in the window. She looked calm. Too calm. I needed to see what hid beneath it. After church, I told her Emma and I were going to the farmer's market. She smiled. Bring me back some of those honey sticks, the lemon ones. Her tone was light, but her eyes lingered. When we came home, I made sure to leave my purse in plain sight on the counter. Inside was a small voice recorder I'd borrowed from the church secretary, hidden under tissues. I wanted to know if she'd touch it. That night, when I checked, the tissues were rearranged. The recorder was still there, but the switch had been turned off. She'd found it and wanted me to know she had. I didn't tell Daniel. I just started planning quieter. I moved my notebook into the laundry room, behind the detergent. I began labeling dates, times, even smells. The more I wrote, the more I felt my sanity returning. Truth has a way of pulling you back from fear. The next test came easy. On Tuesday, I told Sarah the police might stop by to double-check a few things about the fire report. It wasn't true, but I wanted to see her reaction. For the first time, her face went pale. She dropped a spoon, bent to pick it up, and when she rose, her smile was too fast, too wide. "Oh, that's good," she said. "Closure's important." That night, she took the trash out herself. She never did that. I waited until she went upstairs, then stepped outside. The trash bag was heavier than it should have been. Inside, wrapped in paper towels, was the half-empty bottle of cleaning fluid and the lighter I'd seen in her purse. Gone now, just melted plastic and guilt. I stood there, heart pounding, staring at the trash bin under the porch light. The smell of burnt plastic hit me, sharp and final. That's when I knew she was covering tracks, not grieving. The next morning, I asked Daniel to take Emma to school early. "Sarah and I will make breakfast," I said. He didn't question it. Once we were alone, I poured coffee for both of us. "You know, I had a dream last night," I said, "about the fire." Sarah stirred her cup slowly. "Dreams can be strange." "In this one," I continued, "someone was standing outside the car before it blew up, holding a red can." She froze, just a blink. Then the spoon clinked against the mug. "Sounds terrifying," she said, smiling. "Maybe don't watch crime shows before bed." I smiled back. "Maybe I won't have to. I live one." She laughed, but the sound came out flat. I saw her throat tighten, the pulse in her neck flicker. For the first time, I saw fear on her face, not from guilt, but from knowing I saw her. Daniel came home early that day, cheerful, oblivious as ever. I told him Emma and I would stay the night at my friend Marlene's, said I needed space. Sarah offered to pack us snacks. "That's sweet," I said. "We'll be fine." When she turned away, I noticed her hand tremble, small but real. That evening, while Daniel showered, she came to my room, knocked once, opened the door before I answered. "Mom," she said softly, "I hope we can stop this tension. It's not good for Emma." I looked up from folding clothes. "Tension?" "You don't trust me," she said. "Should I?" Her smile vanished. "What are you implying?" "I'm implying nothing. I'm remembering." For a long moment, she just stood there. Then she stepped closer. "You survived something awful," she whispered. Sometimes trauma confuses people, makes them imagine things that didn't happen. I stared at her. Maybe, but trauma doesn't hide lighters in purses. She flinched, just once, then smiled again, soft as silk. "Be careful what you say, Mum. People might start thinking you're losing it." She left before I could answer. That night, I locked my door for the first time in 20 years. Sleep didn't come easy. Every creak of the house felt like her footsteps. Somewhere downstairs, the refrigerator hummed. the same sound that had filled our kitchen after the fire. Only this time it didn't sound like life, it sounded like a warning. When I finally drifted off, I dreamed of Emma's drawing again. The woman in red, standing apart from the family, except now the paper was burning from the edges inward, and no matter how hard I blew, I couldn't stop it. I always thought the truth would come with noise, with shouting, glass breaking, someone finally confessing. But when it started to show itself, it was quiet. Too quiet. It came on a Thursday morning, the kind that smelled like rain and regret. I was sweeping the porch when my neighbour Jim stopped by. He's one of those men who never says much, just fixes things and listens better than most preachers. He held out a small USB drive. "Found this," he said. "Security camera from my shop caught something the morning of your fire." My hands went cold. "What kind of something?" He shrugged. "You should see for yourself." I thanked him, slipped it into my pocket, and waited until everyone left the house. My laptop is old, makes that buzzing sound before it starts, like it's thinking too hard. When the screen lit up, I saw the footage. The street in front of my house, time-stamped 40 minutes before the explosion. Sarah's car pulled up to the curb. She got out with a red plastic can. She looked around, then walked out of frame toward my driveway. I stared so long I forgot to breathe. The file ended there. No sound, no more movement. Just that single truth burned into pixels. When Daniel came home that evening, I didn't say anything. Not yet. The truth needs timing. Say it too early, and people call you crazy. Say it too late, and you're dead. I printed a still image from the video, Sarah stepping out of the car, can in hand, and hid it in my Bible, between Psalms and Proverbs. A strange place for proof, but maybe that's where God hides his too. The next day, I drove to Jim's shop to thank him. He said quietly, "I didn't want to get involved, but that woman, something about her gives me chills." "You and me both," I said. When I got home, Sarah was waiting on the porch, smiling. "You went out early," she said. "Needed some air," I replied. She tilted her head. "You didn't take Emma with you?" "No," I said. "She's safe at school." That word, safe, hung there like a challenge. She stepped closer. "You know, Mom, I feel like you don't trust me anymore." I smiled, small and steady. "Trust has to be earned." Her jaw tightened just for a second. "Well, then I hope you're keeping score." That evening, Daniel mentioned his car insurance papers were missing. "You haven't seen them, have you, Mom?" I shook my head. But I'd seen them, on Sarah's desk the day before, half folded, next to an open laptop with a search bar that read life insurance policy, spouse coverage increase. I didn't tell him, not yet. Later that night, when everyone was asleep, I took out the still photo again. I looked at her face, the calmness of someone doing a chore, not a crime. I whispered, "You almost killed me, and you don't even flinch." The next morning, Emma came into my room holding her stuffed rabbit. "Grandma, Mommy said you're mad at her." "I'm not mad," I said. "Just thinking." "About what?" "About how people can smile and still hurt others." She looked down at her toy. "Mommy says you shouldn't say mean things." "I'm not being mean," I said. "I'm being careful." Emma nodded like she understood more than she should. That afternoon, I called the fire department pretending to ask about my insurance claim. I slipped in a question, if anyone had checked for accelerants at the scene. The man on the phone hesitated, then said, "We found traces of fuel near the front tire, ma'am, but we can't determine intent. Could be anything." Fuel, not a leak, not a spark, fuel. When I hung up, I felt my knees go weak. The truth was no longer a theory. It had fingerprints, a face, a name. That night I prayed longer than usual, not for forgiveness, for clarity. I asked God to show me how to reveal the truth without losing my son. Because that's what this was really about now, not just survival, but saving Daniel before the lie swallowed him whole. I didn't know how much longer I could stay under the same roof with the woman who tried to burn me alive. But I knew this, her calm was cracking, and I was done pretending not to notice. By Saturday, I'd made up my mind. I wasn't going to scream, accuse, or wave papers around. People like Sarah feed on chaos. They twist your words until you start doubting yourself. I would let her tell on herself. All I had to do was open the right door and let her walk through it. Daniel left early to fix a customer's truck. Emma was still in her pajamas, drawing on the floor. Sarah was making coffee, humming off key. I waited until the hum turned into silence, then said, "Jim from next door stopped by again yesterday. He says his security camera's been acting up." She looked up too fast. "Really? What kind of acting up?" "Oh, recording things it shouldn't. He said it even picked up the street the morning of the fire." Her hand froze halfway to the mug. For 1 second, the mask slipped. "That's interesting," she said. I smiled. "He'll probably delete it once he's sure it's not needed." She nodded, but her voice was tight. "Good idea. Nobody needs to relive that day." The room went quiet except for Emma's crayons scratching the paper. I pretended to sip my coffee, watching her reflection in the window. Her breathing was uneven. Fear has a sound once you know it. Later that day, I drove into town. I didn't actually go to Jim's. I went to the small print shop across from the church. The owner, Linda, printed a few copies of the still photo from the video. I told her it was for insurance. She didn't ask questions. When I got home, I placed one copy inside the kitchen drawer, the one Sarah always used for napkins. Another I slipped under her car seat. I wanted her to find them, to feel the same pounding heart I'd felt. That evening, when Daniel came home, Sarah was quiet through dinner. No humming, no small talk. She kept glancing at me like waiting for a move I hadn't made yet. Daniel noticed. "Everything okay?" he asked. "Fine," she said too quickly. "Just tired." Emma looked between us. Kids can smell tension like rain. After dinner, Daniel went out to check the garage. Sarah followed, saying she'd help. 10 minutes later, I heard her voice rising, low but sharp. "Why would you let her stay here if she doesn't trust me?" Daniel muttered something I couldn't catch. Then her voice again, brittle. "She's turning you against me." When they came back inside, she was smiling again, but her eyes were glassy. Daniel looked torn in half. The next morning, I left the house early with Emma. We went to the bakery, bought her favourite blueberry muffins. I was hoping to clear my head. When we came back, Sarah was standing by the mailbox holding one of the printed photos, crumpled in her hand. "Where did this come from?" she asked, voice shaking. I looked at the photo like I'd never seen it. "What is it?" "You know damn well what it is," she snapped, then caught herself, glancing at Emma. "Sorry, I didn't mean to." I tilted my head. "It's not a nice picture of you, Sarah. You look busy." Her face drained of colour. "You're trying to ruin this family." I stepped closer. "No, I'm trying to save it." She stared at me for a long moment, then turned and stormed back inside. That night, Daniel asked to talk. "Mom, Sarah's really upset. She said you're accusing her of things." "I haven't accused anyone," I said. "But you might want to ask her why she was out with a gas can 40 minutes before the fire." He blinked. "What gas can?" "She'll know." He rubbed his temples. "Mom, please don't start this again. You're tired, you've been through trauma." I looked him straight in the eye. "Trauma doesn't print pictures, Daniel." He didn't answer. The next day, I noticed Sarah had cleaned the entire kitchen. Bleach, lemon, everything shining. The smell was so strong it burned my nose. I opened the window, looked out at the hills, and thought about how quiet people can be right before they break. That evening, she came to my room with a folded towel. "You dropped this in the laundry," she said softly. Her hands trembled as she handed it over. Inside the folds was one of the photos, torn in half. I met her gaze. "Thank you for returning it," she smiled faintly. "You're welcome, Mum. Maybe now you can stop looking for ghosts." I waited until she left before unfolding the torn paper. Across the rip, her face was still visible, half shadow, half firelight. The edges were wet, not from water but from sweat. She wasn't breaking yet, but the cracks were starting to sing. That night, I sat at my desk and added one more line to my notebook. The truth doesn't need to shout, it just needs to wait. The breaking point came on a Monday morning that felt too calm to trust. The sky was clear, the air smelled like cut grass, and Sarah was humming again, like the sound could glue everything back together. But I'd learned calm is what comes right before a storm decides to speak. Daniel was fixing the mailbox out front when a police car turned into the driveway. I didn't call them, they came on their own. The officer, a woman about Daniel's age, stepped out holding a folder. "Ma'am, we're following up on the vehicle fire," she said. "We received additional footage from a nearby store." Sarah came to the door, smile bright as sugar. "Oh, I'm so glad you're here. We've been wondering about the insurance process." The officer looked at her, then at me. "This won't take long." She opened the folder and slid out 2 printed images. Same timestamp, same red can, clearer now. You could see Sarah's face turned toward the camera, eyes flat, focused. Daniel looked at me like the ground had moved. "Sarah?" he said quietly. She laughed, too loud. "That's not me. Someone must have tampered with it." The officer's voice stayed calm. "We just need a formal statement, ma'am." Sarah's smile cracked. "A statement? You're accusing me of something I didn't do?" "I'm not accusing you," the officer said. "I'm asking questions." I watched the colour drain from Sarah's face. Daniel stepped back, confusion and fear fighting across his expression. Emma clung to my skirt, whispering, "Grandma, why is Mommy mad?" Sarah turned on me. "You did this. You found those pictures. You're trying to destroy my family." I held her gaze. "I didn't destroy anything, Sarah. I just stopped pretending it wasn't already burning." For a second, she looked ready to hit me. Then she laughed again, but it was the wrong kind of laugh, sharp and empty. "You think anyone will believe you? You're just an old woman with trauma." The officer stepped forward. "Ma'am, we'll need you to come down to the station to clarify a few things." Sarah shook her head. "I'm not going anywhere." Daniel tried to reach for her arm. "Sarah, please." She jerked away. "Don't touch me." Then, softer, almost pleading, "I did everything for us, Daniel. For you." The air went still. Even the birds seemed to stop. "What do you mean?" he asked. Her eyes darted between us, searching for a version of herself she could still save. "You don't get it," she said finally. "She was taking over. You were drifting back to her. I couldn't let her control you again." I whispered, "You tried to kill me." Her mouth opened, but no sound came out. The silence said enough. The officer called for backup. Daniel stood frozen, hands shaking. When they led Sarah out, Emma started crying. I knelt beside her. "It's okay, baby. You're safe now." That night, the house felt hollow. The lights hummed, the clock ticked too loud. Daniel sat at the table, staring at nothing. "How long did you know?" he asked finally. "Long enough to wish I was wrong," I said. He rubbed his face. "I loved her, Mom. I thought she saved me." "She almost did," I said quietly. "Just not the way you think." He laughed once, bitter, then went silent again. Sometimes grief sounds like laughter that forgot where it belongs. Later, when the house was dark, I went to Emma's room. She was asleep, her small hand resting on the stuffed rabbit. On the nightstand sat her newest drawing, 3 figures again, me, Daniel, and her, standing close together. No red this time, just blue sky above us. I sat there for a long while, tracing the outline of the crayon sun. I should have felt relief, but all I felt was the ache that comes after surviving the truth. People think catching the villain fixes everything. It doesn't. It just leaves you with silence and smoke. Before I went to bed, I added one more note in my journal. Sometimes love blinds you, but truth burns you clean. The day after they took Sarah away, the house felt like it had swallowed its own voice. No clinking dishes, no humming from the kitchen, no sound except the refrigerator humming and the clock ticking just a little too loud. Daniel sat at the table with a mug of coffee gone cold, staring through it like maybe answers were floating somewhere at the bottom. Emma was upstairs playing, or at least pretending to. Kids have a way of keeping busy when the grown-ups are breaking. The police had called late the night before. They confirmed what I already knew, that the fuel traces matched the kind used in Sarah's car, that she'd bought it the same morning, that her fingerprints were on the can, there'd be a hearing soon. I thanked the officer, hung up, and sat in the dark for a long time, just listening to the house breathe. Daniel hadn't spoken much since. He looked smaller somehow, like someone had folded him up from the inside. I wanted to hold him, but every time I tried, he flinched. Not from me, but from the truth sitting between us. "Mom," he said finally that morning, voice low. Was she always like that, and I just didn't see it? I wanted to say no, to tell him he'd been tricked, that it wasn't his fault. But lies don't heal, they just rot slower. She was good at pretending, I said. We both wanted to believe her. He rubbed his face with both hands. I should have protected you. I shook my head. You did. You just didn't know it yet. He laughed once, bitter and hollow. That's not comfort, Mom. I know, I said. It's just the truth. He left for a while after that, said he needed to clear his head. When the truck pulled out of the driveway, I stood at the window and watched until the sound faded. The silence that followed was so heavy it almost hummed. Emma came downstairs a few minutes later. She was holding the stuffed rabbit again, the one with one ear stitched back on. "Grandma," she said, "is Mommy coming home?" I knelt beside her. "Not for a while, sweetheart." "Is she mad?" "No," I said softly. "She's just gone." She looked down at her shoes. "Did she do a bad thing?" "Yes," I said, because she deserved at least that much truth. She nodded slowly, then asked, "Do bad people ever get better?" I swallowed hard. Sometimes they do, but only if they really want to. She seemed to think about that for a long time, then said, "I think Mommy didn't want to." I hugged her, tighter than I meant to. She didn't pull away. Later that afternoon, reporters started showing up. Word travels fast in small towns, faster than decency. I closed the blinds, turned off the porch light, pretended we weren't home. One of them yelled my name through the screen door. "Mrs. Hartley, do you have any comment?" I didn't answer. They kept asking about motives, insurance, jealousy. People always want a reason when evil happens. They can't stand the idea that sometimes it doesn't need one. That night, Daniel came back, eyes red, smelling of whiskey. "They're saying she planned it for weeks," he said, sitting heavily on the couch, "that she talked to someone about the policy." "I know," I said. He looked up sharply. "You knew?" "I saw the searches on her laptop," I admitted. "I didn't tell you because I wanted to be sure." His voice cracked. "You should have told me." "You wouldn't have believed me," I said quietly. He pressed his hands to his face and started to cry. It wasn't loud, just those broken sounds that come from somewhere below language. I sat beside him, not touching, not talking, just letting the silence do what comfort couldn't. When he finally looked at me again, he said, "I don't know who I married." "Sometimes we don't until it's too late," I said. He nodded, then whispered, "I keep thinking about all the times I defended her, all the times you tried to warn me." "I didn't warn you," I said. "I doubted myself too." He looked at me confused. "You? After everything?" "I didn't want it to be true," I said. "That's all doubt is, Daniel. Hope dressed in the wrong clothes." He laughed once, then wiped his eyes. We sat there for a while, the TV flickering with no sound. Outside, a storm started building somewhere over the hills, low thunder rolling like a tired animal. Emma came downstairs and climbed between us on the couch. She didn't say anything. She just leaned her head on my shoulder, her small hand resting on her father's. For the first time in weeks, he didn't pull away. The storm broke an hour later, rain beating against the windows. Daniel fell asleep sitting up, Emma curled under a blanket. I stayed awake, listening to the thunder fade into steady rain. I should have felt safe now. But safety is strange after fear. It doesn't feel soft, it feels empty. That night I wrote again in my notebook. You can survive a fire and still feel the smoke in your lungs for the rest of your life. Then I closed it, turned off the light, and whispered a prayer, not for peace, but for strength to keep breathing in a house full of ghosts. In the days that followed, everything blurred together. The sound of phones ringing, people whispering, doors closing. Reporters finally left, but gossip stayed. It moved through town like smoke after a fire, thinner but still choking. Everyone had a version of what happened. Some said Sarah snapped from stress. Others claimed she'd been planning it for years. I didn't correct any of them. When people start talking, they stop listening. Daniel barely left his room. I'd hear him walking around at night, pacing, talking under his breath. Sometimes I'd catch pieces of it. Her name, the word why, and then silence again. Grief has an echo. It bounces off the walls until it finds someone else to hit. One morning, I found him sitting on the porch steps with Emma's school picture in his hands. She looks just like her, he said. His voice was flat, almost careful, like one wrong word would make him shatter. She looks like herself, I said. That's enough. He nodded, but didn't look at me. I keep seeing that moment. When the police showed the pictures, I can't unsee it. You're not supposed to, I said quietly. That's how you learn. He glanced at me, eyes rimmed red. You talk like it's easy. It's not, I said. It's just necessary. That afternoon, Emma asked if we could go to the park. I almost said no, but something in her eyes, hope, maybe, made me grab my sweater. The park was quiet, leaves already turning. She ran ahead, laughing like she'd forgotten how to cry. I sat on the bench watching her chase a squirrel across the grass. For a few minutes, the world looked normal again. Then she came running back, holding a dandelion. Make a wish, Grandma. I smiled. You go first. She closed her eyes tight and whispered something I couldn't hear, then blew. The seeds scattered into the wind like tiny parachutes. Your turn, she said. I took a breath. I wish we can all be okay, she grinned. That's a good one. On the drive home, she hummed to herself, a tune I didn't recognize. When we pulled into the driveway, Daniel's truck was gone. I found a note on the kitchen table. Need a few days. Don't worry about Emma, I just have to think. I didn't panic. I've seen men run from pain before. Some chase work, some chase silence. The trick is not chasing after them. They come back when they're ready, or they don't. Either way, the house keeps breathing. That night, Emma crawled into my bed. Daddy's sad, she whispered. I know. Will he come back? Yes, I said, even though I didn't know if it was true. He always does. She curled against me, her small hand finding mine. Can we pray? Of course. She closed her eyes. Dear God, please make Daddy stop crying, and please make Mommy less angry, and please don't let Grandma get hurt anymore. I swallowed hard. Amen, I whispered. After she fell asleep, I lay awake for hours. The silence wasn't heavy anymore. It was hollow, like the house was waiting for something to fill it again. I didn't know what. Maybe laughter, maybe forgiveness. Daniel came back 3 days later, looking worn and older. He hugged Emma first, then he turned to me. I went to see her, he said. I didn't ask where. I knew he meant the jail. She didn't apologize, he said. She just asked if I still loved her. And what did you say? I didn't answer. That's an answer, I said. He sat down, staring at the floor. I kept thinking, how could she look at Emma and still do it? How could she put gas in that car knowing... He stopped, shaking his head. I don't understand, Mom. You're not supposed to, I said gently. You just have to live with it. He laughed once, bitter. You talk like that's easy. It isn't, I said. But it's the only way forward. He nodded, eyes glassy. Emma wants to stay here, Maybe we should sell the house. Maybe, I said, but let's wait until it stops smelling like smoke. That night, we ate dinner together for the first time in weeks. It wasn't much, soup and bread, but Emma giggled at something silly on TV, and Daniel almost smiled. It was a small thing, but small things are how you rebuild. After she went to bed, Daniel said quietly, "I don't think I can forgive her." "You don't have to," I said. "Just don't let the hate stay. It doesn't go where you think it does." He nodded, then looked at me. "How do you sleep, Mom, after everything?" "Not well," I said, "but I keep trying." He smiled faintly, like that was enough. Later that night, I wrote in my notebook again. Forgiveness isn't about them. It's about taking your hands off the weight before it drags you under. When I closed the book, I looked out the window. The rain had stopped. The moon was out, pale and soft, lighting the yard where the fire had once been. It looked almost peaceful now, just grass, growing back through the ashes. Spring came late that year, like it wasn't sure it was welcome. The trees took their time blooming, the grass hesitated before turning green again. I understood the feeling. Healing doesn't rush. It creeps in slowly, like sunlight through dirty glass. Daniel found work in another town, just 2 hours away. He came home on weekends, quieter but steadier. He stopped drinking. He fixed the fence, mowed the lawn, started planting tomatoes with Emma. Every time I saw him laugh with her, it felt like something in both of us unclenched a little. The first Sunday of April, we went back to church. People stared, whispered, smiled too much, all those polite small-town gestures that pretend to be kindness. The pastor shook my hand and said, "God tests the strong ones." I smiled and said, "Then I'm ready for a break." He laughed, not knowing I meant it. After service, an older woman touched my arm. "We're praying for you," she said softly, "for all of you." I nodded. I wasn't sure what to pray for anymore. Forgiveness, peace, maybe just a quiet morning where nothing burns. At home, Emma helped me bake a pie. She measured the sugar too carefully, like the act itself could keep bad things away. "Grandma," she said, "do you still dream about the fire?" "Sometimes," I admitted. "Do you?" She nodded. "But now it's smaller, like the fire gets tired too." I smiled. Maybe it finally ran out of things to burn. She giggled and handed me the spoon. "Then we win." That night, when Daniel tucked her in, I overheard him say, "You're the bravest girl I know." She whispered back, "I got it from Grandma." I turned away before he saw me cry. The next morning, I sat on the porch with my coffee, notebook in hand. It was almost full now, pages of fear, anger, and small victories. I wrote one last line at the bottom. "When the fire is gone, don't stare at the ashes. Plant something there instead." Later that week, I took Emma to the hardware store. We bought a few flower seeds, sunflowers, marigolds, the kind that don't need much but give plenty. We planted them right where the car had exploded. The soil was dark and soft, easy to dig. When the first sprout came up, Emma clapped her hands. "Look, Grandma, it's not scary anymore." "No," I said, "it's not." Sometimes I catch her talking to the flowers like she used to talk to butterflies. She tells them secrets, promises, maybe even prayers. I don't ask what she says. Some words are meant to grow quietly. One afternoon, Daniel came home early, dirt under his nails, sweat on his shirt. He handed me a small box. "For you," he said. Inside was a silver locket with a tiny engraving, "You are safe." I looked up at him. "Thank you." He shrugged. "You kept us alive. It's the least I could do." We didn't need to say more. The kind of forgiveness we had didn't come from words. It came from the way we showed up each day and tried again. That night, I finally went through Sarah's things. Most of it had already been boxed away, but I'd kept one drawer sealed, like leaving it untouched would keep the past contained. Inside were small things, her perfume, a notebook, a few receipts. At the bottom, folded neatly, was a photo of her and Daniel on their wedding day. She looked happy, real happy. I stared at it for a long time before putting it back. Evil doesn't always wear a mask. Sometimes it smiles for the camera. Before bed, I prayed again, not for Sarah, not even for myself, but for Emma. I prayed that when she grows up, she'll keep her instinct, that little voice that saved both of us. I prayed she'll never learn to silence it just to keep the peace. The next morning, she ran in holding a drawing. "Look, Grandma, it's us." 3 figures again, hand in hand, with a big yellow sun over their heads. But this time, in the corner, she'd drawn a 4th one, smaller, standing by a tree. "Who's that?" I asked. "That's Mommy," she said. "I put her far away, but I still gave her sunshine." My throat tightened. "That's very kind of you," she nodded. "You said bad people can get better. Maybe she will," I smiled. "Maybe she will." Later that evening, Daniel lit the porch light just as the first fireflies came out. Emma ran around chasing them, laughter echoing through the yard. For a moment, everything felt almost normal again, the kind of peace that doesn't erase pain, just makes room for it. When she finally fell asleep, Daniel and I sat outside, saying nothing. The flowers swayed gently in the breeze, little sparks of yellow against the dark. "Mom," he said quietly, "thank you." "For what?" "For not giving up on me." I looked at him, then at the stars. "That's what mothers do, even when it hurts." He nodded, eyes shining in the porch light. Before we went inside, I whispered one last prayer. "Thank you for second chances." The wind picked up just enough to rustle the flowers like an answer. And for the first time in a long time, I believed it. We do not tell this story to judge, but with the hope that someone, somewhere will stop and listen. Because danger doesn't always come wearing a mask. It can come with a smile, a sweet voice, and a hand that looks gentle until it isn't. I still wonder how many grandmothers, how many mothers, are sitting quietly in their kitchens right now, sensing something wrong but too afraid to say it out loud. Maybe you know that feeling, the weight in your chest, when your instincts whisper but everyone else tells you you're crazy. Don't ignore it. Don't silence yourself just to keep the peace. The truth might shake your world, but it can also save it. If you were in my place, what would you have done? Would you have stayed quiet to protect the family you love, or spoken up to protect the truth? Tell me in the comments. I want to know what courage means to you, because sometimes it takes a stranger's story to wake up the strength in our own. We share these stories not to spread fear, but to remind each other that evil hides best in silence, and silence breaks when someone dares to speak. Maybe that's what healing really is, not forgetting, not forgiving too soon, but choosing to keep living with open eyes and an honest heart. God always blesses those who listen with compassion, and I believe courage will lead us all to better days. Meanwhile, on the final screen, I'll leave you 2 of the channel's most powerful stories. I'm sure they'll surprise you, and maybe, just maybe, they'll remind you that light always finds its way back through the smoke.